Um, Hi, everybody from Antirom. Thank you for joining the interview. I guess this is a coronavirus reunion, and we are waiting for more people, so they might show up. And I don't know. Let's start. Hopefully, this is going to record well. Let's start with the first question. So, how and when did Antirom? Oh, just one thing. I just forgot this. Yeah. So I have it.
Hey.
Hooray!
That's it. How many of you have it? You still have it somewhere?
Well, I've still got one somewhere.
Yeah. And I also found this one.
Oh yeah, I've got one of those.
Oh, sexy mini
Yeah.
format.
Don't put that in a sliding.
And I found this one as well.
Yeah.
Oh,
This is Andy's, yeah.
got them all, mate.
Yeah.
That's worth a ton now.
Sophie!
That's worth a ton.
Hi.
Hi.
We just
I need to
started
raise
already.
my...
So you're being recorded.
Hey, Luke's in his shed.
Yeah.
I was going to get some elevation.
Yeah. Cool. I don't know if
You look
heard
taller
me,
in
this
real
is
life,
being recorded already, yeah.
That's nice. There's 9 of us. Perfect symmetry. That's good.
Okay.
It does feel like one of the things we made.
Sophie.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. We already started. This is being recorded now. So this is the interview. We're live with 1 million views. Basically, my mom and my kids, So that's it. Okay. So the first question, how and when did Antirom start? Who's going to go? When? Which year? Okay. Luke.
Too long ago.
Yeah, because when is it? 95?
I think we started working on it in 94 and launched it in February 95.
Yeah.
Okay. And how did that happen? How did Andy Cameron, just how did he find you? How did he pitch it to you?
Most of us went to college with Andy. Andy was our lecturer. And then I think Joe and I and Rob and Sophie left. And Andy was in the year below.
That's right, yeah.
So you were still at... So we used to meet after we'd left college, often around Andy's house. Andy Polane's house and Andy Cameron would come with us. So we were kind of, we were just playing around with stuff, and Andy was good at applying for money.
Andy Cameron was.
Yeah, Andy Cameron was.
Cool.
Yeah. So the history behind that was a kind of a bit of a longer history previous to it, where when we were at college and we were experimenting with all this stuff, we would make these little engines and things, and that kind of carried on throughout, and make these kind of playful experiments. And at some point, I think, we used to go around each other's houses and kind of swap and stuff and work on things. And then at some point, Andy said, there's this new collaborations grant from the, Rob, you should know this, from Arts Council. It was the Arts Council, wasn't it? Yeah. And it was about bringing together, you got given some money to bring together different artists to collaborate.
Okay.
And he suggested.
And also we, like Sophie and Luke and Nick for a bit, were working at places like Dorling Kindersley doing book CD-ROMs, and Rob, myself were at Trip Media kind of making interactive films, both of which we kind of thought was bullshit, basically. So it was kind of fundamental interest. There was just this kind of, it felt like there was the kind of previous stuff was getting shoehorned into digital, which was a bit kind of frustrating.
Well, my impression of Antirom is that you guys invented some of the things that everybody's using today. Like if there was no Antirom, and obviously nobody else would invent those things, then there would be, like no swipe, none of these interactive things, So, for example, most of the stuff on smartphones or tablets would not exist. You were the first guys that came up with those things. Is that correct? I mean, do I have a correct impression?
Well, it's whether you take the position that those things they existed, but we may have come across them early, or if we hadn't invented them, they would never have appeared. Again, I think lots of people end up in the same place, but we just got there quite early, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, can we say that today, like I would not be able to do most of the stuff on the phone if there was no Antirom? I mean, I see that connection. That's what's very, from an art group that Andy Cameron assembled in London to every single, interactive device today, there is a strong connection. Like you're like a little spark. Maybe there was someone doing something in C++ or something before, but you are the artists who were using that programming, that technology. and making it to something that actually was usable, like this thing, you know. And then I remember when I opened it first, I was like, wow, this is something that people made in '95. I mean, it's impossible, you know, so early, you know. I haven't found anybody doing that things earlier than you guys. And
Yes, I mean it's very generous, and I think you can see similarities in lots of the things that have sort of been rediscovered now. I don't know if there's necessarily a
Oh, Luke.
That's a good trick.
Oh, there you go. Start that again, Luke.
yeah,
what
You froze.
did I?
froze,
not
Dick.
necessarily.
Might have to go on. I don't know if there's necessarily linear progression. We kind of the problem with Antirom was it got kind of hidden by the OS changeover. So at the kind of turn of the century, it effectively disappeared and was unplayable, which kind of unfortunately made it sort of disappear somewhat.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and it's not online, right? So,
Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah,
but
because
it's
we able to do lots of the experiments. Yeah, well, you could do just lots of the experiments. Well, again, it's that bridge between technology and culture, that there was all the technology was there, but it needed a load of idiots to kind of bridge it across to culture. And some would have done it anyway. I don't think somebody else wouldn't have done it if we hadn't. We just were around doing that quite early, and because we didn't dive into the web too early, we didn't become millionaires. But we invented we discovered lots of the fun things without having to deal with the constraints of what the kind of web imposed.
I mean, I think what you're saying, Tom, about fun is that a lot of it was that we were getting proficient with the technology and we could see what it was capable of, and we were being made to make it do facile, boring things. So in the evenings, we would entertain ourselves by playing with it, and it was that playfulness which really kind of just led on to just exploring what the medium could do. So it was, like Tom says, a bunch of idiots with technology just wanting to make it do stuff, not with any real purpose.
I mean, I agree. And I think I was thinking of you, Sophie, and Luke doing all that direct scanning stuff as well. So a lot of what we were doing was exploring the affordances of that medium, right? And trying to understand, what are the boundaries and edges of that stuff. And I think one of the things we realized early on, and that was this idea of kind of, I think we called it, point and click interfaces grafted onto old media, kind of blurb around it that was going on at the time was, you'd click on a real button and then you click on a virtual button on the screen to play a video inside a 3D kind of render of a TV screen. And that kind of level of interface in between seemed pointless to us. And I think one of the things that we worked out early on was that kind of direct connection, that you could actually make the interface the playful thing, but the interface was the content. There, I don't think we can claim ownership over that, but there, I think what you see with touchscreen devices today is exactly that, right? Where a lot of the interface craft goes away, because pinch and zoom and stuff like that, on the way you play with images and things on an iPhone, is definitely a kind of you strip away a middle layer of interface and just play directly with the content. And there are things I've seen since, like there was this really nice kids thing called Nighty Night. We put the kind of animals to sleep, and they'd all had this really nice sort of direct scanned straw and wool and things like that. It was very much part of the aesthetic. And now Poolside FM is still the thing. I think if we were around now, we probably would have made something like that. Joe would have, definitely.
I think we need to give credit to Blindrom as well, which was a huge influence at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Jared Van der Kamp. Yeah.
Mediamatic.
So how did
I think an interesting thing, sorry, I think an interesting thing that you were saying, so I was 1 year or 2 years after Andy Pillane. So, while studying all these things like Blindrom, Antirom, and Kotori with his audio thingy bob, and then the stuff you were doing, Luke, with other CD-ROMs, they were all like madly influencing us. And I think what we really thought was great is that we could kind of take this medium, which is actually animation, even if it's a still image that you're like whirling around the screen or something, and you could actually really engage with it. You could touch it, you could do stuff with it. And so I think a lot of the experiments that we did, and also a lot of the stuff that we did that just was shite and rubbish and all that, belongs to the whole research that actually goes to what now is, for me, more than your phone, is more the internet. And I think what lots of people don't really understand, or don't, because it's become invisible is that a lot of research is in these CD-ROMs that are all gone. So that actually makes all these movements, all these bars, what you were saying, when you press a button that looks up, does the screen go down or does it go up? We were constantly arguing and having problems with these kind of interface questions. And I think we did a lot of R&D for the things that are now just totally normal. You know?
Because I was in a group in 2001, 2000 called NIN, and we were doing stuff in Flash. And then suddenly I discovered, through, Tom, Nick, Andy Cameron, and Rob, there was this thing, Antirom, which was doing it you work in Macromedia Director for CD-ROMs. And I was like, wow. And I thought we invented these things, and it was already like half a decade before. And it was like, okay, so we are just reinventing things or copying something that someone made before. And the earliest I found is your work, I didn't discover anything before that, But what's interesting to me, how did people react when you did it? That must have been like, whoa, what is this?
Confusion.
I mean, it's 1995. I mean, I don't remember what else was. There was no internet, just MTV. I don't know what else was then, having something so crazy on a computer screen,
At least one job I went for refused to let me put it in the machine. They were convinced it was going to destroy the computer. And that was...
We kind of, it was hard to gauge the response in a way, because we literally had an event. Chords, I think Andy Cameron's mission was that he wanted the police to be called on us to be shut down. I don't know if that far.
Didn't happen. They just threw us out.
We did just give out. We just gave out the CDs, and I can't remember who said, but they found one broken in Cold Harbour Lane.
Me. I found one in Brixton, in Camberwell. A day later, a fragment of it in the gutter.
But again, it was we got the first phase of the money we got from the. It was supposed to be research money, and we used the money to make it. So it was quite nice that rather than, again, this whole world is full of people talking about it, and it was really nice just to kind of. And again, Andy was very much, and it's always affected me. It's like make it and then post rationalize it. So it wasn't. We didn't have a big theory of how we. It looked really theoretical, but that was always the theory was reverse engineered into the kind of process of what we were doing.
It ended up causing us
problems. Happens most of the time in the arts field.
Yes.
Yeah. But to answer the question, I think the response was, was very positive. I wouldn't say it wasn't like immediate, but it built and built. And as I understand it, I mean, I have no direct experience of it, but as I understand it, one of the things that led to its success as a project and its kind of, its fame within a tiny community at that time was the fact that the group decided to leave all the files open rather traditionally, obviously classic software development, you kind of compile all the files so they can't be sort of taken apart. And then we took the other decision, which is these are sketches and experiments. This is a kind of, these are a bunch of sketches. There's a sort of randomness to both the interface, but also why we've curated this collection from multiple artists, all very very different in their expression, but they're sort of joyous in the, in this spectrum. But this is, these are things for people to play with and for people to copy, and in the sort of spirit of digital, infinitely copyable and that led to its sort of, its distribution and its reputation, because people weren't just sitting there playing with it. People were picking them up, exchanging, like putting their own files in there, learning about, this interesting sort of, visceral experience with their own stuff in it, so that they could really get a feeling for the medium without having to be expert coders. So it was sort of, creating. It wasn't just creating this kind of. I think it's easy to look at the disc today and think that's what it was about, but it was sort of more than that. And it was a moment when, of discovery. It also relates back to what we were saying earlier about this kind of, did we, if Antirom wasn't around, would these things have happened? And it's like they would have happened because somebody would have discovered them. We didn't invent them. They were sort of discovered as part of this inevitability of what happens when you start to think of the interface in a new way. But what accelerated and what helped build the profile and the reputation of the group was the fact that people were kind of welcome to come and play. and that you saw, you'd go and see people presenting work, and they were sort of running it on engines that were created by the group, and that was very much the spirit of the thing. And don't forget as well, it wasn't a commercial project, so
yeah,
it's very much the spirit of it. We weren't selling this thing. We're giving it away, and it's ending up on the pavement in Brixton. It's not something.
I beg your pardon, Nick.
No, go.
I was just going to say, it's probably worth pointing out that at that initial time, we did the CD-ROM, we did the party, if you like, to launch it in Bethnal Green at Cameraworks. We gave out the 500 copies, and correct me if I'm wrong, everyone, but as I kind of remember, right at that point, it was like job done. I mean, in the sense, we didn't have any master plan at that point to come together as a group and start doing commercial work. At that point, that's what we did, and that was it. It was only after that we got together and decided, let's go for some more money from the Arts Council, and then we started thinking about our connections with Tomato, trying to get the work from Levi's. But at that very point of the event at Cameraworks, it was, I mean, the focus was that. It was that and that alone kind of thing.
Plans weren't a big part of Antirom culture, I have to say. There was a thing though with that though, which is you'll remember, Rob, it was your phone number, I think, wasn't it, on the disc?
Yeah, it was
And Andy Campbell's email address. And there was which is the power of old media. There was a guy, I've completely forgotten his name, which was there was a journalist who wrote an article about it in the Observer, the Sunday newspaper of the Guardian in the UK. And you suddenly got the kind of power of mass media, right? Where that made a massive difference. Email inbox was full, and your answer phone was full and stuff. And so that kind of definitely really helped. Yeah, and a lot of people sheepishly kind of admitted that they pirated it, which I think also really helped.
I think it was a Saturday afternoon, and I think somebody came around our flat and they were like, "Oh, we were in a band. Can you come by an Antirom?" We're like, "Oh, what band are you in?" They're like, "Oh, Mott the Hoople." We're like, "I don't know who Mott the Hoople is." And afterwards you're like, "Oh, right." Like, so you had kind of, people just kind of bobbing around our house to buy.
Well, it's like Terry Gilliam wanted one and Dave Stewart wanted one from, so there was quite a lot of kind of people, again, because I think it did tap into, it kind of had a feel of, it wasn't just replicating something, it was trying to find something. It was a new kind of, it felt like kind of punk rock basically, but it felt like a different load of amateurs.
Just to ask, there are only 500, yeah.
I think, did we press some more though? I thought there was some more press.
We did a second batch of which have a slightly you can tell them apart somehow from the printing, I think.
Phone number.
I thought there was like 1 million of them.
We tried to milk it.
No, I think there was 500, and we gave them away quite quickly, and then we pressed up another 500.
So this one is one of the first ones from 500. Who gave me this one? I think Andy, or was it you, Rob?
Idea.
I could be. I couldn't remember. I don't know. Maybe.
Oh, okay.
Drunk at the
Didn't the second one get the cheat button in? Didn't you press R and you could get the menu so that you could show it? Was that the second one?
That's right.
No, that was a demo. That was a demo version.
That's right.
That's one that we used because we got so sick of doing demonstrations.
So that's right. There's a little point about that.
Who was that guy who gave us a project that was just so horrific that we had to kind of cheat round in into that? Horrific.
Yeah. There was a thing about that though, actually, which is worth mentioning. And at the time, and it's completely sort of it's like anti-UX, which was this idea that you should know, classically, you should know when you click on an interface, what's about to happen and so forth. And one of the things that we had this conversation about everything had a home screen back then. I remember having a conversation. At one point we had sort of 5 or 6 home screens, and we were going to randomly go to the home screen. And at some point there was this sort of idea of, why don't we make everything the home screen? So you just randomly went to the next thing and you never knew what was coming. And it made it it was sort of gamified it actually, because it made it surprisingly addictive, because you get this, because it's not really random, you get maybe the same 10 things and think, okay, I've seen it now. And just before you're about to eject the disc, another thing would come up and you never knew whether you'd seen everything or not. And it was, I still find that one of the kind of the best things about it, actually. I still find it engaging whenever I kind of pull out an old laptop to play it, every Friday evening. And
I was just going to
The
ask,
internet
Tom,
killed that, right? The web completely killed that because you couldn't be downloading massive files, and if people thought it was kind of shit, and so whereas in
Well,
CD-ROM, you
Well,
could
it's
do
the
that.
John Warwick, it was a John Warwick phrase that the center is everywhere, and I always really liked that. That it wasn't this.
The Warwickle.
You could get anywhere from anywhere.
yeah.
Well, I mean, it's interesting how long it took for because obviously what we think of now as the feed, whether we're talking about Instagram or Facebook or these things, has a sort of similar quality to that. I mean, with Antirom, it was next,
Exactly,
but I mean, it could have just been like, today it's flick, flick, flick. I think it took everybody a long time to get used to the idea that you didn't have to necessarily sort of thematically, hold everything together in compartments for it to make sense to the user. There was a lot of resistance from that. And you don't forget people like Jakob Nielsen, had such a big, voice in that era, which was all about sort of orientation and the kind of, signs and symbols and structures of interface as this sort of very rational system rather than this sort of more like experiential symbolic place that you could be freer in. So it's interesting. I think those things are related.
Well, thank you for mentioning Jakob Nielsen.
Sorry,
brought me back like 20 years ago in the nightmares.
The trauma.
what he's doing now. Wonder what that guy's up to.
Yeah, well, I checked out Use It. I think recently. Recently means like a year or two ago. I think. Yeah. Anyway, well, there is like another 10 Jakob Nielsens now. They're all.
Yeah.
It's an army. So, what do you think is the legacy of Antirom? So each of you maybe can say, I don't know, a couple of words. What do you think is like? I don't even know what legacy means. Like, what did Antirom change? What do you think? And keep in mind, like, I mean, for sure you're going to be honest. Like when I asked Toscani, I met Toscani, I think this year, and I asked him, did you change the world? And he's like, no, blah, blah. But I mean, for sure he did change the world, and I'm for sure Antirom has a huge legacy. So I'm just wondering, just try, if possible. I know you're all modest guys, and girls, but try not to be too modest. What is the effect, of Antirom? How did Antirom change the world?
Go first.
Did the screen freeze? Sorry, I think we lost the connection.
Our brains freeze.
I'm going to go first. I think it was that mentality that everyone can publish, anyone can publish. It's not, there's no kind of, you don't have to be a big corporation. You just need to make it happen.
Okay, cool. That's a great one.
We might have been able to claim to have killed the page curl.
I think there was a legacy that we probably don't really know. I mean, there's definitely kind of things that ripple through that we slightly talked about. I actually want to talk about Andy Cameron because I think one of the things that his legacy was to pull together a group of young people and tell them why the stuff they were experimenting was important culturally. And he did it over and over again. And from that, we've each then kind of gone on and most of us have done some kind of teaching or some kind of mentoring in our time. So I would say there's a kind of legacy there that's actually probably rippled out and spread out to quite a lot more people than we know.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. What do you think, Joel?
I've got an answer, I think, which is I think it's about drawing attention to the interface as a particular kind of place, but not the game interface as a sort of as a space, but as a sort of an arrangement of things within an interface that may or may not be 3D, that is a place and has a quality and a texture and a set of behaviors and possibilities. I think it's just opening that sort of, that box of tricks or starting that process of, and I think that's where you get, I mean, it's to the thing you're saying earlier about, we're very used to opening a map and pinching and, doing all these things. It took a very long time for, the markets and the sort of directors of these kinds of experiences to feel as though people were comfortable with that kind of experience, interacting directly with a screen. And we planted some of those seeds. We're very early to sort of say, actually, this screen, it doesn't, let's get away with the things that stand in the way that are trying to, mediate this interaction. Let's try and make it as direct as possible. And it was very, I think in those very early experiments, it's very clear that the signs were there for why that was the right way to go. because it just felt there was something very immediate and satisfying in the use and the interaction. So even without any, not trying to achieve anything, not trying to buy anything, not trying to find something, there's something very kind of that it tells you in the way that you interact with it. There is something of substance in that kind of discovery, and that, and I think the best interface. I mean, if you don't forget, even like 3-4 years ago, it was like a big deal that Apple were moving away from skeuomorphism. Where we had a skeuomorphism joke in Antirom in a sort of deliberately shit 3D rendered interface, because we were like, you don't fucking need to pretend that it's an object with buttons on it to interact. So it was just the piss. I mean, Tom and Rob were working for Trip Media, where everything was a kind of big shiny glowing button, and it was like, well, you don't need this shit. Anyway, so I think it's about that just that really discovery of the screen, not the game screen, but the kind of the new multimedia screen as a place.
I think I'd kind of echo Andy Polaine. I think when you said legacy, it immediately came to mind Andy Cameron for me, because if there was no Andy Cameron, there was no Antirom, plain and simple. But apart from that, I think it's just that sense of play and irreverence and sense of humor that I kind of keeps with me from Antirom for me. Yeah.
But I also think kind of realizing how political it was. Actually, we were rebelling against the kind of how digital was being coerced into capitalism, and we were kind of fighting against that. And that, again, most of the legacy and the focus of digital hasn't been about how lovely things feel. It's about how it's being used to target. So most marketing isn't digital fun shit. It's digital video targeted through really all the interesting stuff around digital is happening in targeting, and it's kind of commercialization. And I think the legacy's always been, how do you keep fighting back as a kind of creative, trying to make work that makes the world a better, coming from a design point of view, i.e. how do you make the world a better place, rather than the marketing position, which is how do we sell more stuff. So again, I think we've always I got coerced into the marketing world, but you start realizing I'm a designer being coerced into that. And actually that kind of Antirom pushing back against that kind of it being exploited to sell more stuff to people is we all get drawn in that because we all want a house and food and shit like that. But again, still being aware that just doing cool shit is
It's in the name, right? It was called Antirom because CD-ROMs have become synonymous with this kind of multimedia experience of sort of encyclopedias and stuff. That's why it's called Antirom.
I have to say, Andy, that it took me a couple of years to realize that. I never, I didn't.
Unfortunately, we just really hated Romanians. If you look at Antirom now, it's basically just massive Romanian racists.
No, Roma. No, I didn't make the connection between two at all, So, but when I did, it was sometimes like maybe 10, 12 years ago. I was like, probably I was driving. I was like, wow, finally I got it. Anti-ROM means anti-CD-ROM.
Yeah.
What was
8 track?
Joe and Luke still have to do their legacy answers.
Oh yeah.
Just quick. For me, one of the things was that this human side to all this playing around with computing really came out, because I think humor is one of the kind of factors that really, because at the time I think it was on the brink of not being so human, or so, we were playing around with computers and everybody else was with cameras and filmmaking, and that was all in the arts already and all that, but we were like what are they doing with their computers? And look, they've got like a small window with a video on it, haha. And it was just this fact that, it is funny. We can do stuff that's fun and interesting and weird and all that with it. That kind of gave me then, because the guys made Antirom and similar experiments, that I thought, wow, I can go on doing this very experimental stuff and actually even kind of make a living out of it. That kind of moment happened, and then I found out, you can do a lot more with these things. So it was but it's, as we could see on the screen, it was kind of a very nerdy male thing. and there were, I mean, in Westminster, there were a couple of very good coding female women making great stuff, but I don't know, they just didn't kind of appear in this kind of a very nerdy male, then capitalist kind of way. I mean, they were much more theoretical feminist approaches that then kind of maybe now can be researched and you can find out what they did, but certainly not on this very commercial side.
Techno hordes.
Yeah, techno whores, I think some of them were called.
Yeah,
Okay, that's not an insult. That's a name. Okay.
that's a
Yeah,
name.
that was the name of the
Like
group.
I thought you were insulting someone.
Antirom,
I was
techno
like,
whore.
okay. Yeah.
That was Amos Nicholas.
Somebody
Higgins.
hated from the 95. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Joe, you're next. Legacy.
Am I successfully unmuted? I hope so.
Yes.
Sophie said, I think anyone can publish. I was going to say anyone can program. That's what I took away from it and what I've tried to carry forward. I think the tool that we used mostly in those days, Director, helped a lot with that. It facilitated a way into programming through a kind of timeline interface, which meant you could go from linear animation to jumping around within a linear animation and onwards from there to more complex programming. So it allowed people with no previous programming experience to get into making interactive software in a way that I don't think was really possible, or I wasn't aware of a route into that before that. And I think that facilitated a lot of what Antirom became. And it's hard for me to say because it was such a long time ago, but I'm not sure what people's attitudes to technology are, younger people than us now, whether they don't have that fear of, computer programming, whether that's all gone away. I think it's probably still out there. I think it's still a bit of a kind of mystery to a lot of people. But I hope that Antirom maybe demystified that process a bit for some people.
Cool. That's a great one. Luke.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tricky question. Sort of the
Everybody
idea of,
did it before you. Now you have
yeah.
very
Nothing left to say.
yeah.
Sort of the sort of random passages of a few brief people through a moment in time, wasn't it? It's not. I don't know. The legacy thing, like I said before, is tricky. I mean, one, because it's a sort of it wasn't really part of the mode of the group. There was no sort of idea of setting out to change things. We were just dissatisfied with what was there and thought that if you can, for a few minutes, do something that remotely kind of pushes through that and sort of suggests that there might be something a bit more interesting to be had, then that's a success. If people have seen it since then and they get that sense of it, then it's been a success. But I can see that when I saw the early phone thing, I could see a lot of people repeating the experiments that we'd done, and it didn't feel like they were kind of influenced. It felt more like, oh, this is a kind of cycle of technology that people are entering in again. There's a point at which people needed a lot of content for phones, and it was quite throwaway and playful, and there was a commercial capacity for that. And at the point when we were doing things, there was a lot of acceptance of things that didn't really have to do anything. Around the end of the 90s, there was a turn where websites had to have shops, and it became more commercial. I'm not sure whether we were kind of played any kind of causal part in that. I think that we took advantage of a moment which was quite free and playful, and it did feel like, unlike other, like film or photography or fine art, it felt like an unpoliced area where, because nobody really knew what was going on or how to do it, you could do what you liked. And that sort of occupying that sense of freedom for a while was all it really was. I think it would be easier to answer if it hadn't sort of disappeared from view so effectively. But I know I've not really given you a soundbite there, but
No, it's cool. It's great.
it was always a sort of Dadaist irritant in terms of any kind of aggrandizing sort of objectives with it. It was supposed to be something that was kind of, it's like the kind of it was the book. I think there was at one point talk of making it with a sandpaper cover, which is an obvious nod to the Situationist, or a sandpaper cover that destroyed it from the inside. I think the Dirty Column did that as well with records. So it was kind of supposed to be sort of self-consuming and destroying. The exit button looked like a crash. Didn't it make a crash sound when you?
The little bomb that you used to use for when your Mac crashed, we stole the icon and used the bomb.
So it was always kind of affecting towards a kind of destruction. Anyway, that's enough.
Those are all the questions I had. I wanted to ask some more, but I kind of feel actually that, I have one more question, but okay. I feel this is a nice whole, if you agree. I wanted to ask some more, like how it influenced your work, what you're doing now. But to be honest, I feel like this is it. This is the way the interview should end. And did you have any other reunions? Do you have anything where that's a question? Yeah. So I have another question. Did you have any reunions?
We had one.
We did.
Yeah, 5 years ago, 20 years. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Okay. Cool. Well, what I'm worried about is that design doesn't have history, and I think that nobody knows really what is the influence. My impression is that the influence is huge, and if you were doing science, you would have like a Nobel Prize, but design is not so, clear. It doesn't have research papers, doesn't have citation, doesn't have all these things. So it's a little bit harder to do. This is kind of like archaeology, figuring out, sorry to compare you to Egyptians, or something like that. Not that old, but in digital.
And again, I think, it did connect in with that tomato again, because it wasn't like it was that era when design, it was cool to be collaborative. So again, it wasn't like Neville Brody's studio. So yeah, Tomato being that kind of we were influenced by Tomato in that era of kind of creative people collaborating. And I think that's super important. Again, most of us went to film school where collaboration was one of the few disciplines where you were it was critical to collaborate, where most creative disciplines about the auteur, which is the kind of pyramid based, there's the director and everybody works with the director. So I think it also benefits. I think it was timing with things like director, as Joe was saying, but also people getting excited about it was a phase where collaboration in a kind of creative collectives was super interesting. And I think it really lent itself. Yeah, again, it didn't help us all become millionaires, but I think it helped us make really good work.
And I think that the influence, again, coming back to what Andy Polaine said, that Cameron had in that, it's not for nothing that lots of people, because of the many Andys in the company, called him Dad, just so that he had a kind of nickname. And I think he had like a very strong influence on us in that way also, this idea of collaboration and this idea of sharing these kind of knowledges, basically also because he didn't understand how to code very well, so he had to kind of share. But making that kind of necessity something positive he was very clever at that, and it was great.
Do you mean the commented out sections that says, I don't know what this does?
Yeah, he got me into Antirom to get everybody's code together to make like navigation systems, so that I got code from Tom, from Onion, from Andy Polaine, and it was interesting to see how versatile people would write. Some things were quite similar what they did at the end, but the code was completely different. It was really interesting. I just had to watch out that variables wouldn't destroy each other. Some people used food names, animal names, I don't know what, as variable names.
That's right.
And again, it was pre-specialism, so a lot of people would code and design. So again, after that era, it again moved back to specialism. So it was an interesting time that you could you could know enough. But Andy, not many people. Yeah, you couldn't run a company like we ran without specialist developers.
What Joe said, he definitely took kind of the fear. He would tell us, he would say, you're stupid, you can code, it's easy, just go for it. He definitely pushed that in when we were in education. And
Yeah.
it's the same with
I remember him early on when he was first teaching us to code. He would be quite honest about the fact that he said, I'm only ever a week ahead of you. So he would learn something one week and he would teach it to you the next. And again, that was quite influential in this sense that, yeah, you know what, no one's a font of knowledge. It's just, you just got to kind of back it out and work it out.
Yeah, there was definitely a kind of inverted pyramid in the industry actually after that too for a while, where you know the younger people coming in knew way more than the kind of older people in that industry who were moving across from their kind of previous established ones.
I'm going to play your sound. Sorry.
I was just going to say it's kind of flipped. It's interesting. I was just hearing Tom and Joe talk about that you know, a lot of us came from photography, film, video backgrounds, and where you had to be collaborative because you just couldn't make a film or a video on your own. And multimedia was this thing that you could kind of do everything yourself. And actually it's kind of flipped the other way around now, where, as Tom was saying, you kind of, to do that stuff now you need specialists, but actually now everyone with their iPhone is a filmmaker. It's kind of gone the other way.
But then it's flipped again. So yeah, during lockdown, I'm going to learn. I want to do a machine learning project. So I was trying to find someone who knew about machine learning, and I couldn't. So I just did it. Again, the tools, it's like equivalents of Macromedia, but now for machine learning. So you can just go and do. I can do my kind of amateur machine learning, which I couldn't have done 5 years ago. So again, the timing, you always have to, again, that spirit of, okay, I'll just go and fucking find out how to do it and do it, and kind of cobble it together in that old Antirom way is but then, you look at being at Google, and the mythology within Google is that Google was all cobbled together at the beginning. So the kind of the founder myths is it's similar across all these sort of businesses.
Well, everything that you're saying seems to me like you're talking about the band.
I was going to say there's a lot of parallels to the music industry, I think, in that, which segues on to Luke about to play a sound file, I think.
Final tap.
Change a fucking message, Tom.
That was me.
That file has been named by Anne. Tom, Andy wants to be included.
So there's a story. Actually, so there's a story about all of that stuff. We talking about the sort of affordances of the medium. There was lots of clunky, you know, palette shifts and stuff like that, and so we drew upon this kind of whole load of sets of samples and sound files that we got gathered together.
Tom's answer phone message machine was kind of provided most of the interstitial hits, didn't it, Tom?
But again, if you look at BlindROM, if you have a look on Vimeo, there's some really good screen captures of Vimeo. It's worth BlindROM. It's worth looking because it was just so. Again, it was that kind of punk rock feel. So things are like we had to change between 8-bit and 16-bit. So and it made a massive flash on the screen. So we then took a massive archive of kind of big Hanna-Barbera crashes and smashes. So every time your monitor would change, it would make a sound. So rather, we weren't afraid of making things feel like they're a bit broken.
And also we weren't afraid of borrowing very heavily without any kind of rights. We kind of plundered the cultural archive recklessly, which you couldn't do now at all. I think that's one of the other joys of giving it away, was that we were kind of slightly unculpable. But I drew heavily on the kind of whole.
I think that was one of the reasons to give it away, actually. I remember definitely Andy saying, well, if anyone sues us, we haven't made any money anyway. So I think just on that, though, just thinking through, we've all, you don't have to look at the old photos. We've all got very different aesthetics and, tastes and stuff. And it all got kind of munched together as like a kind of Antirom smoothie in the work we did. I actually think that's one of the kind of really interesting things about it. It doesn't have this. The house style is that it's just a real kind of mashup.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know if my sound is okay. Thank you very much. I'm really proud to have all of you. I'm terrified if the recording doesn't record or if something is wrong, because I never recorded 9 people in an interview. I don't know how Zoom is gonna assemble it all. So please, if something is wrong, don't blame me. Maybe we try another one. So thank you, Luke, Tom, Rob, Joe, Nick, Andy, Joel, and Sophie. Thank you very much. I'm sorry there are others who didn't come, but maybe the next time. And so I'm going to put this up, email it to you, and then you can tell me if it's okay or not. And I want to tell you, in the name of the entire humanity, thank you very much for making Antirom, piece of history.
Thank you, Nicola.
Thanks, Nicola.
Thank
See
you
you later,
very
guys.
much.
Thank you.
Nice to see you all.
Thank you very
Take
much.
care.
Ciao.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.